Hello, it's me again, Bunting, and today we will be exploring the world of sound design and arrangement in the style of Tripp St using our nifty tools, Vital and Ableton. Let's go. Alright, hope you like that little arrangement because per usual, in just a moment I'm going to go piece by piece, break it down so you can understand it and incorporate this kind of stuff into your own bangers, right? But before that, I ask that you please like the video as well as leave a comment if you have any questions on this video or any suggestions for a future video, as well as subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notified. All three of those things help me out a lot, as well as show your support for the channel, so your appreciation for the banger vids per usual, right? And one more note, if you're interested in having access to the presets I made in this video, as well as this project file itself, I have a Patreon, which if you support me on, you get access to these presets, this project file, as well as pretty much every other video ever, I think. Yeah. Plus some extra bonus content if you're into that. Wavetables that don't suck. I know you're all about that. But that aside, let's actually get into the content, right? With drums, where all bangers begin. And to start off, I'm going to tell you the BPM 84, right? For this Tripp St style, this kind of breaks hip-hoppy style, usually sits somewhere around 80 to 90 and even up to 100-ish at times, right? But I liked 84. It sounded like something Tripp St would use in his songs, as well as it's a nice medium, right? The real appeal of this BPM is to lay down a real head bobby groove. Now the question is, how do you make a head bobby groove? To put it simply, right, make sure you're hitting some kicks on these off beats, right? Just to have it slightly off kilter, you know, leave a bit to the listener. Don't have it super straight, all the strong beats. You can do that, but it's not going to be as head bobby, which is what we want, at least for this style, right? For the rest of the drums, you'll notice I layered a bit of Foley here. And by Foley is just kind of crackly sounds recorded from just shifting stuff around in real life. As for samples, I have some in my sample packs you can get on my site, plenty of free ones. But I got these from Reddit somewhere. And basically just grab a sample that you think is cool, find a good bit of it, and put it right before your snare with a little fade. And there you go. You have a little beginning right into your snare, and then you can get a different crackle for your impact. And these are nice for adding a bit more interest to your drum grooves, right? And really you can mess with the samples, you can mess with the timing, put it on the snare, put it off the snare, all sorts of stuff. And of course, these are basic hats, right? But what's really going on is in all this lovely arrangement. So the first thing you want to do when you're writing this kind of arrangement is get a solid chord progression, right? And what better place to start a chord progression than the bass line? So essentially, music theory wise, this is just kind of outlining the chords we're going to build, right? If you want to know more in theory, I have a whole theory video, right? But basically, just take your bass line, right? Make it groovy, make it a nice, beautiful progression that you can then start putting some beautiful chords on top of. Next question is, how do you design such beautiful chord sound design, right? How do you design a pad is what it's called. And to start off, basically, pads are basic, right? They're basic shapes, right? So for this, I decided to use a saw wave. It's a very rich waveform, great for pads. And I decided to layer two of them. So this first layer, what it's doing, it's providing a nice and full mid-range to begin our pad off, right? But let's say we wanted a bit more high-end. All we would need to do is take another oscillator, get a basic shape. You can make it the same wave, you can make it different, you can really experiment with the waveforms, and just have it layered 12 above, which is going to be an octave, right? But if you go into our effects, it's not quite a pad without this profuse amount of effects that are destroying my CPU. Right, that's somewhat usable, right? It also helps have a bit of attack on a pad, so it has a bit of that slow fade in, right? But once we have a nice basis, just drown it in reverb, And it's a lovely pad, right? You can mess with the mix, turn the mix higher or lower. You can turn the time up to have it even more washed out, right? But beyond that, how do you get that nice, like, wee kind of moving sound, right? And the best way to get wee moving sounds, right, whatever that is through filters and little EQ peaks. So you'll see I have a few kind of peaky effects here, all being controlled by this LFO. So whenever you hear a kind of wee effect, essentially what it is, it's always going to be some kind of peak, whether that's just a straight up peak in an EQ or a filter, or it's in a high pass filter, which I'm using to also cut out some low end, unnecessary kind of mid range. It can also be a phaser, which I just pretty much just turn the mix down a bit, so there's a bit less. You know, that's all a phaser is. It's just a bunch of peaks. And you hear a lot of that kind of movement in Tripp St stuff, especially the pads. It can make stuff really rich, right? But if you want this even sounding even more high fidelity, right? Peaks are cool. Reverb is cool. Let's add a bit of chorus, though. And the chorus is where it really widens up in the stereo field and sounds a bit more polished, besides a bit of the CPU crackling we've grown to love at this point. And then I just threw on some delay on mid ping pong for some even more spaciousness. You can put it before or after the reverb. You can mess with the order of all these effects, mess with the automations, you know, just really make it your own. You don't have to follow this exactly, but you probably get similar result just switching up the shapes. You know, make it your own, have fun with it. One thing I like to do, low passes are really nice for a very lush, warm tone, while sometimes you just want a nice kind of airy layer where the high pass comes in. This switches the filters, but that's a pad. It's beautiful, it's amazing, it's versatile. Make some lush chords with it from my theory video. The next thing I decided to add into this arrangement to make it even more lush was a little vocal. You hear a lot of vocal samples in Tripp St's work. You know, I recommend just looking up studio acapellas on YouTube, snatching it with YouTube to MP3, right? Of course, I don't condone this action, right? But you get lovely stuff from it, right? The question is, how do you make acapellas actually fit your track? I also covered a bit of this in my theory video, right? As you can tell, melodic stuff, very theory intensive, right? But as you can tell, you can just go right in the sample and transpose it around until you get a note that sounds better than other notes, really, and just keep that. It's more or less in key. But as you can tell, this is not any normal vocal acapella. I did a bit of magic to it. So if we unwarp it, or actually just warp it, it's going to be something like that, right? Okay, don't flag my video. Whatever, copyright, right? But a cool trick to use to get very like atmospheric spacey vocals is I just like to turn on this warp, right? I like to stretch the BPM. If it's on this beats by default, you can get some cool glitchy results, which I'll show you more of, right? But to get the really ambient kind of spacey sound, texture is where it's at. Cool sound, very versatile, very beautiful and neat. You can do it to bass sounds too. Like, don't feel limited by vocals. Put this stuff everywhere. And yeah, stretch it out as much as you want. And it's awesome. And if you want to kind of cover up more or less that kind of a bit of reverb, it's always nice to kind of make it a more of a vocal pad. You know, I just crank the dry wet, crank the stereo time. Of course, use any reverb you want. You know, I know a lot of people hate Ableton's reverb, but it gets the job done. And then here's a bunch of EQs I decided to scrap and a bit of a saturation. Just for a very subtle amount of brightness into the vocal. Right, nothing crazy, but on the topic of vocal, let's just go right to this other process vocal, right? This is where the beats warping mode comes in. So, like I showed you, stretching the sample gets you all sorts of crazy effects, and that can greatly be affected by the warping mode. So as you tell, when it's on beats mode, like that, texture mode, it's a lot more musical, complex pro, weird stuff, you know. But beats, for whatever reason, gets you such a cool glitchy sound that I hear a bit of in Tripp St's work. So really, all I did was try to kind of work these little glitches into the arrangement, because even though it's kind of a glitch, it's also hitting a kind of tone, right? Sounded painful, right? And really, I'm just stretching them out, pitching them to just a amount of steps that I think sounds good within the arrangement, you know, more or less in key. And I'm also adding a bit of volume fades so it swells towards the end, right? As for the effects, right, nothing crazy. I threw on a bit of echo, which is the biggest thing, helping space it out into that arrangement. Feel free to add a bit of reverb too. Also added a bit of wider to make it, well, wider. You know, stereo space is nice. Bit of corrective EQ, bit of OTT to make it brighter. And I added a shit ton of glue compressors, basically because I didn't feel like going through each sound and getting it more or less the same volume. So just dragging down the threshold a bunch on the compressors will kind of more or less make them the same volume. But it kind of does make these fades do about nothing, but we live and learn, right? Okay, so sample manipulation aside, you know, have fun with that, experiment with it. Here's some more Vital work. You know, some more squelchy sounds you'll hear in a bit of Tripp St stuff, and in a lot of electronic stuff in general. And like I said, it's always going to be these peaky filters. Nice, solid. Of course, we have the reverb and delay, right, for a bit of spaciousness. And then a bit of chorus for that stereo-ness, right? And of course, compressor, which I didn't cover. I just always throw on a multiband. Not always, but it's great to get a bit of extra clarity and brightness out of the sound, right? But the real sauce is always this bandpass, right? So this is pretty much the same patch. I just took out a bandpass from analog. Well, you can just go from the default, drag it to the middle. That's the bandpass. And if you want an even cleaner kind of sweep, you can turn it to 24 decibels, and just automate it. As you can see, if I go into my automations, what I did, if it even shows, okay, it's just vanished. Basically, I'll just redo it since it was all weird. I just drew in a little automation to this filter cutoff. You see, just like that. And it's pretty solid, especially once you start layering on these spacey effects. Makes a very cool effect type sound to layer. Right, and it's not exclusive to these shapes either. You know, you can have a bit of FM action, you can change the basic shape, you can change all the levels, you know. Just make it your own. Also, pitch bending is a cool... Another cool thing to mess with these kind of squelchy sounds. But that just continues on the age-old adage, whatever, that squelchiness, wee-wee-ness equals filters and high peaks. Okay, now for some actual basses, moving into the bassy section, right? I know you're just excited. You're at the edge of your seat watching this. And that's a bass. Last time I checked, that does categorize as a bass. I don't know if I'm out of touch or anything. Let me know in the comments. But this looks complicated, right? I'm sure you're very scared, you're very unsettled, but I'm here to tell you it's okay. This will all be over soon, and you'll be a better person because of it. But long story short, Tripp St's basses, they're all over the place, which is awesome, right? But they have one thing in common. It's that they're fat and they have excellent movement. And what better way to get fatness than basic shapes right here? And what better way to get movement than lovely filtering, right? So let me actually just initialize this to show you how to make something like that from scratch, right? So the first thing I like to, well, basic shapes, obviously. You can mess with any basic shape. But I find squares are pretty nice to really mess with because they aren't too gritty like the sine wave, which gives it a very sine wavy tone, but they're still very rich and timbre. So right off the bat, I'm going to go get some notch filters, right? So if you're familiar with Neuro, right? Neuro uses a lot of notch filters, and you can grab them from turning on a filter and going under notch blend, notch spread, or BPN or band pass notch, right? Whatever you do, find a freaking notch filter and crank it around. You can already hear a bit of it. Let me turn off this auto filter to show you more in detail. So you can just draw on each notch filter individually. using some lovely automation, right? You know, as much as you want to do in here. But for the sake of ease, let's just keep it in Vital. Let's draw like a half decent, interesting shape. And let's just start slamming on the notch filters. Another thing I did, I turned up the drive to saturate it even more, even though it doesn't do much. So after that, let's turn on filter 2 and get another notch from wherever the frick. I don't care. You can also mess with the resonance to get it a bit wider and narrower. But if you notice, it's not making a difference. That's because it's taking the input from oscillator 2, which is unfortunately not on. We could take it from oscillator 1, but what I want to do is take it from filter 1. You see, and already you're getting some pretty gnarly, cool movements. Next up, we can add even more notches, right? You can just really go forever with the notches, creating something interesting, cool. Change the amount, just make it forward or backwards. You know, and then when you're done with it, of course, slam it with the multiband compression, attack up, maybe not have it clip so much. Of course, the chorus just makes it freaking insane. Vital's chorus is goated. And what else could we do? A bit of distortion. If you're into that, you know, you don't need it, but it can help. You know, just mess with all this stuff. You don't have to follow me bit by bit, piece by piece. Look, and even another notch if you're just insane like me and want as many notches as possible. You can even get a double notch thing, which I don't want. So forget that. Just ignore what I said. Let's go. And of course, you can all assign these to different things. You know, you can just go insane with it. All these LFOs telling it to do a different thing, all stacking up into one insane mess of beauty and fatness. All right, that's a great pickup line, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, that gets the job done. The real question is, how do you dial something as crazy as this in? And the answer to that is always a little auto filter. You know, beyond the auto filter, you can also just, well, use any low pass filter, or you can even just take this in Vital, take this and get yourself a low pass by toggling this. You see, but basically that low pass is really what allows you to dial a sound in. No matter how crazy it is, throwing a low pass on it and drawing in some nice movement can always reel it back in into something musical, dynamic, and beautiful, right? As you see, I just took that and automated the frequency up. If you're insane, you can make it a wub, right? If you're insane, you can do anything. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just a YouTube guy, right? But yeah, it gets the job done. And you can mess with everything, you know, everything, and you can make a bunch of sounds like all these. A lot of these sounds made with the same basic principle, which I'll get into, right? Of course, right, to build up into the drop, I have a bit of a white noise riser. Typically, I might have a bit more dramatic of a build up, but I just wanted to make it a concise and beautiful arrangement with a bit of auto filtering in with this drop vocal, cutting out the rest of the stuff to make it nice. But let's go into the actual sound design, because I know that's what you're about. I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know you on a personal level, but based on my viewers, I can assume. I'm allowed to assume, I'm allowed to do anything, right? But if Vital ever opens, I won't do anything. I mean, if it ever doesn't open, you know what I mean. Anyways, this shit's lagging like terribly. Okay, so in Vital right here, you'll see it's pretty much the same patch we just made. It's beautiful. If it even goes, Jesus Christ. Yeah, pretty much the same patch, square wave, right? But the big difference is I added a bit of distortion and a phaser. So basically, a phaser by default is going to look something like this. If I set everything to default value, right? Yuck, it's moving all over the place. I don't want it to do that. It can be very sick, right? But one thing I don't like is that it's stereo. And another thing I don't like is that this LFO moves it on its own. So I'm just going to freeze it. Now I can mess with this center knob on my own. You probably can barely hear me, but I'm going to mess with the center knob just on its own. I'm going to tell it exactly what to do. But I don't even want it to move. In fact, I'm just going to keep it in a single position to create almost a kind of harmonic effect within the bass. You can really automate it all over the place if you so wish, right? But I'm going to use it just as a kind of harmonic-y effect, right? So this bass isn't alone, right? For some more harmonic effect, I was on the line about incorporating this, but I had a bit of operator action. So within operator, all operator is, it's just simplified like Vital or any synth, right? So this synth A, first of all, you want to make sure it's on this mode, which means everything's playing side by side. Otherwise, everything's FMing each other, FM, 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 right? Blah, blah, blah. But I just had two sine waves. I moved up one up to 5 to have a nice harmonic coming through. A bit of subtle saturation to make it a bit fatter on this sinoid fold, as you can tell. Yeah, tiny bit of fatness, plus some OTTs for a bit of brightness, a bit of cleanness out of it, with a low pass filter. Long story short, all this stuff is to just brighten it up a bit, and the low pass filter provides some extra movement, right, as it opens up. Again, low pass filter is goated, right? All to just provide a subtle harmonic layer to this bass. You know, I heard a bass like this in a track, and I decided to, you know, get something like it. You know, you can also get something similar just by further saturating a bass like this with distortions and whatnot, but you can also just layer it. You know, there's plenty of ways to achieve similar sounds, right? But that's that. That's just one bass. We're not even done yet here. I know you're fiending for all the content I'm dropping. So let's unfreeze these basses real quick. Okay, so this little bass right here may surprise you, right? Well, these together even, right? But clickbait aside, it's pretty much the same old bass, right? Again, plenty of variations to make. At the end, I think that basic shape fatness plus the filtering for movement is going to be your formula, right? One more thing that doesn't really fit in this part of the video, but feel free to add FM anywhere for different timbres and different interests, you know, transpose it around. Yeah, that's that. But yeah, pretty basic, same stuff I did before, except just by having this filter hit lower rather than the whole way gives it a much more wubby harmonic effect. You know, really nothing different about it, just that filter. That just shows you how much you can really get out of a filter. See that versus this, all subdued and wubby. It's quite beautiful, I think, right? But just like my other bass, I layered it with this same kind of harmonic bass, you know, except I automated this little sine wave to move around in a funky way with a bit more saturation, bit of OTTs, same stuff, get it fatter, you know, have a little bit of a wub, and then a bit of OTT at the end to bring it out a bit. Layered together. Yeah. Low pass filters are goated. Operators goated. I'm tired of saying goated. Let's just move on with this business, right? Okay, so this pure moisture right here. I know you love the moisture. Again, low pass filter gives everything a beautiful rhythm, a beautiful flow, whatever you want to call it. And you see, I just switch it up for a sine wave. Same principle, add a bit of a phaser, switch it out for not a sine wave, a saw wave, but a bit of pitch bend. You know, pitch bend is always allowed. And when you get the pitch really low, especially with saw waves, you get a lot of moisture coming through, right? Plenty of moisture. Maybe too much for you, okay? I'm sorry if that was too much. I'm sorry if that was triggering, giving you some sort of anxiety from that. But we're done with that because it's simple, it's done, it's frozen. Never to be. See, it was water, it was moist, now it's just frozen in time. But anyway, this bass right here, yeah, different filter, same principle. You know, this goes to show you can really keep things simple and create a whole drop out of just duplicating and adding variations. This is where a bit of our FMing comes in. 2 sine waves FM'd. When you're FMing, make sure this level is down most of the time, so you just hear the beautiful FM, none of the layers, right? Of course, on a sine wave, generally you want some type of drive or distortion to really bring out some more harmonics from it, right? That's that, or else you're going to end up with a very simple but can be cool sound, but it's going to be pretty kind of thin, pretty sparse. Okay, this bass right here, we're speed running through the basses because they're all just about the same in a lot of ways, right? If you really want, you can copy every little thing. See here, I chose a triangle wave because I thought it sounded fat. It's really that simple. I trust my ear. I make it beautiful. You see that phaser in the low end really makes it a lot fatter, a lot wubbier, more harmonic. I just love that. Right, and make sure if you're working with any kind of thin waveforms like the or simple like the triangle or the saw wave, add a bit of distortion, or else it's gonna be super tiny like that. He's just a little guy, right? We want a big guy though. We want it fat, we want it beefy, and any kind of distortion is gonna be great for that, right? And beyond that, you know, just having this flow kind of switching up and following the bass line we laid down earlier in this part. Right, that's all the basses, you know, 2 words, fat and moving, right? Maybe you're not moving in the emotional sense. I mean, it depends how good you are with it, but moving in the moving sense, you know, get the filters going, get the basic shapes going, and you're set, right? Besides that, what's going on? Plenty of effects, you know. Tripp St doesn't hesitate on adding a bunch of ear candy, which is quite nice and inspiring, right? Makes it very trippy, as some might say, right? I said the trip word, Tripp St. But as for effects, I kept it simple. You can sound design everything, like your squelches, you know, do all sorts of stuff. But I just pulled out some cool kind of impacts. I thought this was a cool impact. I thought that was a cool impact, right? And of course, bringing back some Foleys for some interest in the drop. You can also treat other basses as kind of sound effect, ear candy stuff. Right, but all together it makes it sound very full, very psychedelic, and pretty awesome. Of course, if you want it even more psychedelic-y, whatever, add a bit of echo so it's not so dry, and it bounces around between your ear holes with a bit of reverb as well. Always welcome, you know. But really, I showed you everything that's going on here. Hope you were able to follow that. Of course, any questions, drop it in the comments, like, subscribe, do all that jazz. But that's about that. You know, make sure to have a great melodic basis, you know, transform it along the way, add new stuff, and make it interesting, transition it, have cool basses, and experiment. You know, it's all about experimenting, make it your own. Yeah, that's that. Once again, if you want to check out my Patreon and get these presets, get this project file right here. You know, that's all in the description, as well as some samples, presets, lessons, and more at buntingmusic.com. You know, get a lesson with me. You get to talk to me. Oh my gosh, I'm just some guy, but I'm glad you're excited. Yeah, that's all I could think to say. One more thing, join the Discord. It's a like online community. You can hang out with us by the flock, Bunting's flock. It's on Discord. You can hang out and give feedback, because tonight I'm going to be hosting Feedback Friday. If you want your tracks reviewed and you want to get some feedback on a track, yeah, be there, be square. Yeah, I'm just talking at this point. Peace out, guys. Love you. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bunting. Peace.